Senator Chris Murphy from Connecticut has fought for tougher gun laws since the shooting at Sandy Hook Elementary School in his state nearly 3 years ago. He joins us tonight from Washington. Senator, thanks for being with us.
Sure, thanks for having me.
You were in that group of Senate Democrats today, obviously watching very closely what's happening in the House. As we look back, though, nothing has really worked in the nearly 3 years since Sandy Hook. So why do you believe that today you have a better chance of getting something passed? What is different?
Well, so I think you have to have a little historical context here. After the attempted assassination of President Reagan, it did take 10 years for the Brady handgun bill to be signed into law. And so I think we do understand that sometimes this doesn't happen immediately. And the NRA built up their political infrastructure over the course of 2 decades. And so we've got some work to build up a national grassroots political movement around these anti-gun violence initiatives that we announced today. But we understand the chances of getting a vote, a successful vote on background checks with Republicans in charge of the House and the Senate are probably slim, but that doesn't mean we're going to give up. The families in Newtown, Connecticut are not going to give up, and I think that's what we were signaling today, is that we are going to enlist the 80 to 90% of Americans who want tougher background checks, who want to make gun trafficking illegal, and we're going to keep the pressure on. We're just not going away.
In today's Washington Post, E.J. Dionne wrote about, as he said, that it is now time to look at manufacturers who make smart guns. So basically calling for the government to buy from manufacturers who make these guns, putting an ID stamp on every bullet fired to make them traceable. Is this a more viable option to go after the gun manufacturers and that route?
So I think we have to take every avenue that is available to us, and I'm hopeful that the president maybe tomorrow will talk about some executive actions like the one that EJ outlined that he can do without Congress. There's also the ability to try to make sure that actors that look like commercial sellers, people who are selling frequently online or at gun shows, are considered sellers subject to background check requirements. So there are other things that the president can do through executive action, and I hope he takes those steps. But in Congress, we've got to let Republicans know that you just can't stay out of step with 90% of Americans and continue to get sent back. Democracy doesn't allow that. And I think you're starting to see Republicans, at least in the Senate, realize that they can't be silent in the face of these mass murders. We're just going to try to keep the pressure on. You
say you're not giving up. Obviously, the families from Newtown are not giving up, as you mentioned. And yet, while there is always a great deal of interest after there's a terrible tragedy like we saw in Oregon, it seems that eventually that interest and that support starts to wane. Now, I know you say that it took 10 years for the Brady handgun bill, but what's your best guess? I mean, how long will it take for you to achieve some of these measures that you're working toward?
Well, I hope it isn't 10 years, but I think we have to understand that until we have new leadership in the House and the Senate, we are likely not going to have a successful vote on the background checks bill. And that's why what we announced today is that we're going to the people. We're going to ask them to be a part of this effort. And listen, ultimately, we will get this done. I have a 7-year-old that went to first grade today, and every parent out there has to understand that if kids in a small town like Newtown aren't safe, if people living in a quiet town in Oregon aren't safe, then your kids aren't safe either. And I think you are going to start to see voters coming to the polls and asking questions about whether their member of Congress is going to support background checks. You are going to start to see members of Congress lose who are running for office without supporting where the majority of their constituents are. That might take a cycle or two in order to get a Congress that will support these measures, but it's going to happen. That's how democracy works. This place can't stay out of step with 90% of Americans for much longer.
Senator Chris Murphy, appreciate your time tonight.
Thanks a lot.
I want to bring in now